Hello everyone, welcome to Change Now. Today I have the honor to moderate a panel in a discussion about the role of investors in changing companies. The Sustainable Development Goals of the UN and the many recent initiatives around the role of corporate citizens and also of investors in having an impact in improving the planet and the people has become very important. Today I have the pleasure of having two distinguished speakers to get us kicked off on the role of investors in changing companies. They themselves have worked with large companies. They are also currently investors, and they're trying to change the ecosystems in France and abroad where companies are having a positive impact. I'd like to welcome Clara and Gonzague to join me here in order to start our panel. Thank you very much for your participation. And as I was saying in the brief introduction, you have an amazing journey as corporate citizens, but at the same time, investors that are trying to create an ecosystem that improves how companies interact with planet and people. So we would like to hear from you. You will be our keynote for this session on a little bit your journey, a little bit how you're trying to really mobilize this effort, but also some of the challenges and opportunities that you both see. So I'll let you kick it off, and I thank you in advance for participating in Change Now one more time.
Thank you, Ari. Gonzague and me, we are very happy to be here at Change Now. We love this event. We have been there the first day. We believe this is very important to gather all the people that want to change the world and to change now. When we started in 2013, Gonzague and me, I wanted to help my country. He wanted to change the world. And we all know that if we want to change the world, we have to change ourselves. And we thought that where we could have really an impact is by changing the finance. How do you finance the company, whether they're big, small, or starting companies? And we decided to say that we wanted to support the young entrepreneurship because they are the ones who are looking at the world where it is and where it can go, whether it's about environmental issue, social, governance, and so on. And so we decided to create Raise with ideas which were at this time really not on the table on the financial institution, especially in the investors. So we built the first thing we did was to build what we call in French the raison d'être. Yes. And this raison d'être was to support the company, help them to grow, whatever the size they had. And we had three pillars that we develop and we make life, we improve every day. The first one is generosity. So we are, I think, in the world, the only investment fund where the people are sharing 50% of their benefits. You know, that we call in our word the carried interest. When we receive carried interest, we directly give 50% to a foundation dedicated to entrepreneurship. The second was parity. So Gonzague and me, we are both of us running Raise, but in any entity you have a parity. So you have always a boy and a girl managing the fund, and that brings us the dialogue and the fact that we can't decide alone. No one can say it's me, and no one can say it's your fault. So it's really a team building that we have created with this parity. The third one was to put the impact in the heart beating of the investment we are making. And we have, for that, create our own methodology to adapt to what you said in introduction, the UN criteria, and to be sure that we support not only, we control not only what we are doing ourselves, but help and support our participation and the company we follow, whether it's in our philanthropic part or it's in our for-profit part, to help them to go to the impact and to take at the heart of their activity the question of environment, of social and governance. And the last one is, of course, the one which is the most important is innovation, but not only incremental innovation, but what we call open innovation. And for that, we have opened a location called Relive, where we share with big corporates and startup the key innovation of the world of tomorrow and where they can work together to implement it. And when we started with Gonzague, we thought that if we could do a fund with 300 million, we'd be happy. And now where we are?
1.3 billion euros, which is incredible. As Clara says, in fact, we are fed up about the opposition between profit and philanthropy. And we feel that if we recruit people who are more focused on sharing profit than winning profit, could be better. So we decided to, first of all, to ask to a lot of big group from the CAC 40 to invest in our company. Now we have 60 shareholders, I think, and we raise now 500 million euros. And the idea is very simple: to invest in minority stake in companies and to sharing, as Clara said, the carried interest for the foundation. And after that, we meet some people who want to create a venture fund. We say, okay, so are you prepared to sharing your carry? They say yes. So we have a fund of venture of 150 million euros. And we meet some people who want to make a real estate investment. And you say, did you are prepared to share your carry? They say yes. So we have a fund of 500 million euros in real estate investment. And the last one was an impact fund.
Yes.
A fund of 250 million euros, sharing by Aglé and Ceres, with the same system that every partner share their carry. The foundation is the most important foundation in France. With
Private foundation.
Private foundation with 30 million euros dedicated to help on a philanthropic basis startups with programs like loan at zero interest with no guarantees, loan of 100,000 euros, loan of 500,000 euros, some to help the companies to give some hours from big groups like BCG, KPMG, Pricewaterhouse to help companies. So we follow more than 350 startups now since the beginning, and the foundation have seen more than 5,000 startups. So in the startups area, I think the image of Raise is a company where we are focused on sharing our profit more than getting our profit. Yes. But our shareholders say we are very happy because we win a lot of money. And I prefer to be
proud of.
Yeah, to be proud of sharing my profit than getting my profit. So that's why we are very surprised to manage more than 1.3 billion euros. We expect to change the world, because if we change the finance market, I'm pretty sure that's more easy to change the world.
Right. Well, thank you. It's very encouraging to hear your story. And I think this provides a great background about how investors can actually change companies. Mm-hmm. Now, perhaps if I may ask you a few questions just to build on your introduction, and that is, what has been the challenges I mean, you have spoken about great success, about, your network opened up to this idea of sharing your carry interest. But has there been any challenges? You seem to be two very driven individuals, so I'm sure you probably don't see those challenges as real. But if there are others that would like to do something similar, if we would like to mobilize peers to maybe do the same, what challenges could there be, or what success path could you offer?
Don't believe the people who tell you that it is impossible. Mm-hmm. Because if you really believe in it, I remember that when we started, people were telling us, oh, you are asking corporates to invest in Raise. They will never invest. It's not their job. Or you will ask people to give 50% of their benefits. You will have you won't have the best in class. So we had a lot of people telling us, you are dreamers. Or how can you change finance? Finance has always run this way, has been running this way. Why do you want to change it? And so, first of all, I would say two advice. First, don't listen to the people and build your thing. Don't try to change the big thing existing, but build what you want to do and what is your dream. And if you do it by yourself, you will be successful. Yes. And the thing is, and what we have discovered, it's less challenges than new opportunities that we haven't seen before. And the main one was that when you recruit people who are people who are generous, they are curious. Because if you're not curious and you are not interested in people, you are not generous. It's so simple. So, and today, the future comes from elsewhere. It doesn't come straight at the street. You have to, it comes from everywhere and you don't know where it comes from. So the ones who are successful are the ones who are curious.
Yes.
I want to learn from the things they don't know, restarting like children at school, new areas and so on. And so we have a team of people who are absolutely experts in their job, but have always the eyes, the ears, listening to the entrepreneurs, and this is interesting, this is a new trend, and so on. And that has helped us to capture before the others in other jobs that we didn't know. Gonzague was saying that we had a team coming to do the venture. We were not experts in venture, but by matter of fact, by meeting a lot of entrepreneurs, we became experts of venture capital. So.
One of the challenges could be that we try to demonstrate that we are not alone. A lot of companies are sharing their profit or their turnover, or they give some hours to help people. So it's why in 2018 we create a movement which name is Mouvement pour l'économie bienveillante, Movement for a Benevolent Economy. And in fact we have, it's not a label, it's only a movement. And we have more than 4,800 companies, like Danone, like Nature et Découverte. Nature et Découverte is a very good example. Since the creation of Nature et Découverte, they decide to give 10% of their profit for a foundation for nature. That's why Nature et Découverte is such a success. It's a very good success. No, it's Fnac and Darty, but it's a success. So one of the challenges is to say, if you share your profit, your turnover, a part of your profit, systematically, not 1 year yes, another year no, but systematically for a foundation or an action or an association in your business. Us is in entrepreneurship. Nature et Découverte is for nature, but in your business, and you ask to all the employees to help you in this action. It's fantastic for the clients, for all people who work in the company. They have the real purpose, the sense, the raison d'être, and the community, the society. It's better for everything. It's when you do that, you change now your environment.
Great, very inspiring.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you maybe a question that has to do with a generational shift. We're seeing a change in demographics. We see women, obviously, a lot more empowered as asset owners.
Not enough, Henry.
Still, we need to work further, but we see them a lot more engaged in asset owners or decision makers in the young generation, the millennials and the Generation Z. There is this sort of movement where people want to have an impact when they're young, not waiting until later in their career when they have constructed some success. What pieces of advice would you have for those new generations that maybe might not have the same gravitas, but that they have the same drive to perhaps continue moving this économie bienveillante or that type of movement?
If I may, I would say to the young people, take your chance, because 30 years ago there is no Facebook, no Google, no GAFA, no so much money around to help startup to be created. So I think now there is a lot of opportunity to try to make their dreams in reality. And when we look on all the startups we help in the foundation of Fresh Sherpa, more than 70% of the startup were created because they want to change something in the world. Something in network, something in food, something in agriculture, something, but they want to change something because they feel that they have to do something. And there is a lot of tools now in this world, with again this GAFA, with all the money we can raise. So take your chance now.
Yeah, to the young generation, I would say three things. The first of all is, in a way, they are more experienced than we are. And I think we are in a world where the young generation should be our teacher, because they understand the world better than we do. We have been in a black and white world, let's say it's this way, where we learn on books, and we had to go and rent the books to be able to learn. They have the whole information in front of their eyes, and they can give access of the knowledge, and they can also produce. And it can be in any area. It can be in cultural area. It can be in business area. So they are the one who know better where the world is going tomorrow. Second, putting values in front of everything. You can do business in many ways, but if you want to go high, or if you want to go long, you have to be sure that you keep some values, and those values, you stick on it, and you never say, okay, I would do this way, it will help me to do the business faster, and so on. We have stick to the 50% of generosity, we have stick to the parity, and believe me, in the beginning, when you had in the investment sector, you had 98% of the people working there 7 years ago were men. And pretending to do parity, now we are 60, and we are a full parity. So you have to stick to your value and the thing, because it makes you the game changer. So if you want to succeed, in a way, you can't be game changer in everything, but be game changer in one thing. And the last thing, which is very simple, it's always about execution. So take the best people around you who are better than you, and do things better than you can. Don't be afraid to choose people who are more clever, smarter, more experienced than you are. Because if you are the dreamer, if you are the one you want to do something that changes the world, you will always be the one who will give the vision and have the best people around you to help you to execute.
And perhaps, Thank you very much. Yeah, and perhaps the last advice for young people is, if you want to work in the financial market, please think about sharing your profit, not on the profit only.
Right. Perhaps for the closure, I'd like to maybe ask you a question related to that, and that is, we see a lot of interest of mainstream financial players into this impact investing world. But there's also risks of impact washing, or what people call greenwashing. How to keep people honest? What do you think are some important aspects to make sure that people really do what they say they do?
It's why we have put our own methodology to be sure that when we invest in companies, we can help them to follow what they are doing, and be sure that we can prove that the money we have put in those companies has been used to change the company, to help it to become an impact company. So we have to be very cautious that it is a difficult path. We have to work on it, and we have to be as scrupulous as we are when we make our we make our results, financial results. The impact result has to be as clear than the financial results.
Two additional points. First of all, the LPs, the investors in this sort of fund, yes, are very focused about the reality of your impact action. And secondly, most of the team, our team, is paid with related to the impact, with the KPI on the impact. So we are pretty sure that they are very honest in their way to work with impact.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Gonzague. You've given us a very real case study on how to bring about change, on how to engage the ecosystem, but also on how to do it in a way that is sustainable and for the long term. So this has been a great opportunity for us to hear from your experience. I will invite you now to join us in the other part, so we can continue with the next part. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a very inspiring opportunity to hear of two entrepreneurs who are creating a lot of change and are creating long-lasting change. Our next speaker is going to be joining us virtual. Hi, Brooke, how are you?
Hey, Henry, great to be here.
Thank you so much, Brooke. So we're really happy to have you as our second speaker in this session about how investors are, could change corporations. And I think in the last remarks from Clara and Gonzague, we heard about the importance of research. We heard about the importance of measurement. And I think what best to follow up than Ceres and the work that you do. So perhaps to get us kicked off, Brooke, I'd like to ask you if you can tell us a little bit about the journey of Ceres and how Ceres is trying to help change the way investors behave, the way investors are working with companies. So why don't we start with a little bit of that journey, and then we will continue having an exchange. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Very great to be here. And, I think at the heart of what we're trying to do at Ceres is build a more sustainable capital markets that actually values and benefits people, human dignity, our ecosystems that we depend on, our climate that we depend on, and future generations. And we're a nonprofit organization based in the United States, founded 30 years ago. And our mission has always been about spurring private sector leadership on sustainability. We were founded in the wake of the Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989. Okay. And really at that moment, it was a time when the investment community had been very quiet about the importance of environmental ethics, environmental codes of conduct, and it really was an opportunity for the investment community to come together and learn from the environmental community on what needed to change. And for the past 30 years, we've been working to develop a network now of over 200 institutional investors with 37 trillion in collective assets, large mainstream asset owners and managers, as well as smaller sustainable investment firms who are working with us in various ways to advance expectations for better management by corporate America and beyond of sustainable, towards sustainability goals aligned with the SDGs. And obviously, climate is one of our top priorities. And what's so interesting about the timing of this session, Henry, is that, as I said, we were founded in response to the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And just yesterday, we saw something that was absolutely stunning. The board, two of the Exxon board members have been voted out on the basis of the fact that shareholders did not find them to be climate competent because of a lot of longstanding concern about the way in which that oil company has been slow to really embrace the need to decarbonize and move in alignment toward the Paris Agreement. So, I think this is all to say that investors have a growing role to influence the largest global corporations on ESG issues and to address some of these systemic risks that are creating value destruction across our economy.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think if you were founded after the Exxon Valdez, you're one of those examples that don't waste an opportunity, don't waste a crisis to have an opportunity. And I think what you said about yesterday, and we're going to be speaking later with our colleagues from Follow This, who have been also very active in the recent activities about advocacy and stakeholder management. But if I may ask, because I think in the case of Ceres, you also are mobilizing collective action. And I think you have a program around collective action, because it's important to somehow, how do we create this more the norm than the exception? Can you tell us a little bit about, how you engage in collective action? What's the toolkit that you are providing investors to engage?
Yeah, I mean, and it's been really interesting because, for decades, investors have, particularly large investors, have extraordinary access to directors, to corporate management, but they have been very reticent to use their voice to discuss environmental and social issues until recently. Certainly, the largest asset managers, BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard, State Street, these are folks who own, large portions of most S&P 500 companies. They have been only in the past 5 years really beginning to speak out on these issues. The tools that are available to the investment community, particularly in the US, and I think the most potent tool I would point out is the Shareholder Resolution. In the US, for the past 30 years, starting really with the apartheid, the anti-apartheid movement, we've seen smaller share owners file resolutions asking management to take action to address these social and environmental impacts. Now we see hundreds of these shareholder resolutions being filed every year, and they are very potent because they are public, because they create a timeline for management to respond, and because increasingly other share owners are voting in large numbers to support them, creating increased pressure on the management to respond. And this is where this notion of collective action really gets into play, where there are growing numbers of initiatives where investors are coordinating with each other to align around certain sectors where they see the need for increased action on social or environmental issues. And I think one pinnacle example right now is something called the Climate Action 100, which brings together 600 institutional investors from 6 continents and is focused on decarbonizing the largest fossil fuel intensive, carbon intensive companies around the globe. That initiative has really changed the conversation in the boardrooms of major oil and gas companies. It's created incredible visibility of the issue and of the lack of action by many companies to take the needed changes seriously. So certainly collective action is an incredibly important role in moving investor influence forward. There's certainly a lot of individual and very important private conversations that are happening, but I think that the fact that you have BlackRock voting to support the ouster of directors at a company like Exxon on the basis of concerns around climate change. You see them doing similar things at companies like Berkshire Hathaway. State Street Global, another large asset manager, has said they will be looking to vote against directors of nominating and corporate governance committees who are not working to disclose the diversity of those boards. And if they're not seeing diversity of those boards grow over time, they will also vote out those, seek to vote out those directors. So there's been a real, I would say, escalation in use of or focus on ESG issues, and really, a kind of muscular, vigorous form of corporate stewardship that we haven't seen before.
Thank you, Brooke. I think what you're saying, it's also something that a lot of people are questioning. There's been a lot of scrutiny on action. And given that everybody is now signing the pledges on net zero, and people are also using the SDGs as their target, there's also certain dilemmas and certain issues where investors are not walking the talk. What sort of role do players like Ceres could actually continue working on to make sure that we keep those people honest and that they really deliver what they say they would like to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, on the topic of climate change, we are very focused on taking these net zero portfolio goals that many investors that we work with are setting, and really making sure they're translating this into a detailed action plan that, just like we would ask of Exxon or Chevron, involves milestones and interim targets that really shows a pathway for decarbonization. So just a couple of weeks ago, with a number of our partners, we released this roadmap for how investors can do this and really what the best practice expectations are. I think the other thing where investors have a lot of work to do, and there's a real opportunity, is around public policy engagement.
Yes.
And there's two dimensions to this. There are companies in their portfolio who are lobbying in ways that are misaligned with goals like the Paris Agreement, which are funding industry associations that are fighting tooth and claw against making progress on the regulatory and policy front on these issues, all while as companies they're professing to aim toward net zero themselves. So investors need to engage more on this issue, but they also need to look at themselves, particularly asset managers and banks. Their engagement on green finance, financial regulation, of course, but we need to see more positive policy engagement on ESG issues that affect the real economy, and more transparency from investors themselves on how they are engaging and where their industry dues are going and what issues their industry associations are supporting.
Thank you, Brooke. Perhaps if we can switch gears a little bit, I think there's been huge emphasis on the E of ESG, and you have provided several examples. Given a lot of the recent developments on diversity, equity, and inclusion, what's sort of the role that players like Ceres could also have in moving some of those agenda that have to do a lot more with social and governance issues than environmental issues?
Right. And investors do, particularly in the US, and I know also in Europe, have had a long history engaging companies on these issues. From the late 1990s and the early aughts, we saw a huge number of shareholder resolutions filed on the issue of workplace discrimination for GBLT employees.
Yes.
And we've seen over 150 companies set anti-discrimination policies in response to this investor engagement. Obviously, other changes are happening in the ecosystem, but there's an incredible track record of investors, often small investors, using the shareholder resolution as a door opener with management to make the case around the business benefits of strong anti-discrimination, strong diversity policies in the workplace. And I think this is incredibly powerful, and the business case is growing and is incredibly strong. So we expect investors to continue to move forward very vigorously on this topic. In the United States this year, I think racial equity is there's a number of resolutions being filed, and we expect much higher votes on those resolutions than in the past.
Thank you, Brooke. If you can tell us a little bit about some of the frontier topics or innovations that you are looking into at Ceres, as let's say, impact finance gets mainstreamed. Anything to share on new frontiers?
Yeah, I mean, we see water scarcity and pollution issues as a very underappreciated systemic risk. We have a looming gap ahead of us. Certain estimates from the World Resources Institute put us looking at some sort of a water scarcity gap of 50% between demand and easily accessible supply by 2030 in many markets around the world. Water is the lifeblood of so many industries, yet governments and I think investors themselves have failed to fully appreciate what happens when the well runs dry. So we see that as an area of much increased investor stewardship and engagement in the future. And then we, of course, are seeing this is the year of the biodiversity COP, and we're seeing so much interest and engagement from the investor community on ending tropical deforestation, including investors who have engaged Brazilian government directly on this issue and really threatened divestment if more wasn't being done by the Bolsonaro government. So those are two topics that I think are not at quite the same level as climate discussion, but are fast behind.
Thank you, Brooke. Perhaps just to start wrapping up, there's a little bit of a divide between the US and Europe, or at least to engage that we are in both continents today. In the sense that here, as you know, the European Commission has pushed this whole taxonomy on sustainability, and there is a bit of a policy role that maybe might be a bit stronger than what it is in the US. How do you see those developments, and are there lessons to be learned from that across both oceans?
Yes, I mean, I think we have always looked to European investors and European companies and policymakers, of course, as being, more enlightened and more focused on the triple bottom line. Now, I think on the other hand, in the United States, we've had access to tools that allow for, more early stage engagement with companies, like the shareholder proposal, where you only need $2,000 in shares and to hold the stock for a year in order to file. So while overall our financial system and our governance system has been behind in addressing these issues, I think some of our social investors have been very much at the vanguard. And now we are in a new age. The past 5 months with a new administration, the commitment we're seeing from the Biden administration to move forward things like mandatory climate disclosure, to see that our regulators like the Federal Reserve begin to take this issue very seriously. I think it is, it's starting with climate, but I think it's very important to recognize that, change is happening, and there is a strong commitment from the administration to bring this into the oversight of the financial system.
Thank you very much, Brooke. Our time is up, but I'm really grateful for providing us with an in-depth outlook on how investors could use different toolkits, and also how you can mobilize large investors. And I think what we've seen this past week and a half or 2 weeks in action regarding oil and gas companies is a good example. So kudos to you and the Ceres team, and thank you so much for joining us on Change Now today.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you. So after listening to our opening remarks on Raise, where they provided a little bit their own journey, and now listening to Brooke from Ceres, where she provided us with the toolkit that investors could have and institutional investors could have to also change companies, I'm going to move to our last part of this session, and I'm going to have a hybrid session with one colleague here in Paris, Tarek, that I invite to come to join us here. And then we're going to have Mark, who's going to be in the Netherlands, I believe, who's going to join us virtually. So, Mark, hi, how are you?
Good afternoon, Paris. Here's Amsterdam. Hi, Tarek. Good to see you.
Hi, Mark.
Hi,
Good.
Henry. Great to see you.
Same here. Pleasure meeting you, and thank you so much for joining us. I know you've had a very busy last few days, and perhaps let us get started. So Mark and Tarek work for Follow This, and I'll let you explain a little bit what you do. But I think what it is really encouraging is to see a dream becoming a reality. Perhaps we can sit down and we can have the conversation, the three of us here. I'll be trying to look at all cameras and I will see how we do this. But perhaps, Mark, let me start with you. How do you start this journey? I know you come from the Netherlands. I know you were in the shipping industry, I believe, before. And you all of a sudden decide to actually fight the oil giants. Tell us a little bit about your motivations, your dreams, and your frustrations, because a journey has a little bit of everything.
Yes, thank you. It actually starts with a simple question, and that's, or a simple dream, basically. After I saw the movie An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore, I thought I have to do something about this. I'm an engineer, I know what's happening, and I know I'm sorry, I'm hearing myself double, so it's quite difficult to...
No worries, Mark. Can someone on the sound help us? He's getting a repeat. Try it again, Mark.
Yeah, okay. this sounds bad. Maybe I just, when I talk, I just put off my mic. But in 2006, I saw the inconvenient truth. I was an engineer for 12 years, a little bit ashamed that I'd never worried about climate change. But then I thought, okay, and now I know the problem, I know the solutions, I have to do something about it. I first did it as a journalist, and I wrote down many times, wouldn't it be great if the oil majors, Shell, BP, Total, would put their full weight behind the energy transition? They have the billions, they have the brains to speed up the energy transition. They didn't listen, and then I thought there must be another way. And then I thought the only people they have to listen to are their shareholders. The shareholders are all long-term shareholders, pension funds, for example. They have a big stake in stopping climate change, so I thought I should organize pension funds to support the oil majors to make these drastic changes they have to make. And I started with Shell. Basically, it started quite simple. I thought, yeah, I felt pretty powerless towards climate change. I thought, okay, I can put solar panels on my roof, but that wouldn't make any difference. I have to ask the people who can make a difference. And that's Patrick Pouyanné from Total, Ben van Beurden from Shell. They have like 20 billion a year to spend. So I, on behalf of a few hundred shareholders who are interested enough to buy one symbolic share in Shell, I went to the shareholder meeting in 2015 and simply asked the board of Shell, we need you for the energy transition, we need you to stop climate change, what are you waiting for? And then the answer was, Mr. Van Baal, it's great you come to our shareholder meeting, and please come back every year and we will tell you when the time is right. But then the next year, I had managed to get enough people together to file a shareholder resolution. And then things get serious, because then it's on the agenda, and then investors can vote for it. So in 2016, for the first time, shareholders, big institutional investors, voted for our climate resolution. Only 2.7% was brave enough to vote against management advice of Shell. But that's how it started, and it became more year after year. And after we passed the threshold of 6%, Shell started to respond. And Shell was the first oil major to make a big promise to reduce all emissions, so also their product emission, the so-called Scope 3 emissions.
Thank you, Mark. Let me maybe now bring to Tarek. How did you get involved? And what are some of the similarities or differences between action in the Netherlands versus France?
Well, there is a very first similarity is that I have been an engineer for 12 years, precisely in oil and gas. So I'm basically in the same position as Mark when he watched An Inconvenient Truth. So we basically have the same starting point. And I found myself asking, how can the oil and gas industry that is so powerful and so able to change, how is this industry able to change towards energy transition, and to basically save climate from old habits? I happened to hear about, follow this, and what Mark was basically doing in the Netherlands and in London through press releases. And I went on LinkedIn, I simply contacted him and said, oh, hello Mark, my name is Tarek and this is my background, and I'd love to see how I can help in France. Because when you look at big oil and gas majors, you think basically in 5 companies, and one of them is French. So I said it was very natural to me, well Mark, what can we do in France? So we met in September 2018, and here we went, and we agreed on working our best to have a climate resolution filed by shareholders here in France, which happened in 2020.
Bravo. So
just with 1.5 year, and let me emphasize how extraordinary that is. We met in September 2018. 1.5 year later, there was a climate resolution on the agenda of Total. And I just want to say this is such a great example of when you start something like Follow This on your own, how many people read about it, hear about it, say, wow, this is really going to make the difference. This is really going to help. How can I help? And Tarek is an excellent example of that. After a couple of hours, we decided, okay, Tarek is going to start follow this France.
Well, I think Tarek has never followed such a literal sign like follow this, and you arrived, so congratulations. Perhaps fast forward a little bit, Mark and Tarek, tell us what is happening with climate resolution in the last few weeks or few months, but I think in the past 2 weeks we've seen an increasing success, if one could say. Tell us a little bit, what were the factors of that success and whether this is a movement that has no return?
Shall I start, Tarek?
Yes, please, Mark. I think it's yours.
I think investors, big institutional investors, one by one now realize what's at stake. They know that if we're not going to meet the Paris Climate Agreement, we will end up in a world which is devastated by climate change. And also a world economy was devastated by climate change. So the investors who not only invested in oil and gas, but in the entire economies, realize we have to make sure the Paris Climate Agreement will be met. And we are the shareholders in these big oil companies. They can make or break the Paris Climate Agreement. So this year they really decided, or at Shell, 1/3 of them decided there's no time for another round of discussions. We have to compel Shell to really take action and therefore vote for this climate resolution. So this year there was really a surge in support for a climate resolution. Remember, we started at below 3% in 2016, 2017 it went 6%, we kept on 6%. Last year at Shell it went 14%, at Total it was 17%. This year, all the big oil majors are telling their shareholders, so BP, Shell and Equinor, there's a resolution from follow this, but we have now this great promise for 2050. We're going to be net zero by 2050. So now leave us alone implementing our new strategy where we will increase emissions. And we said to investors, if you allow this, you allow them to do business as usual the next 10 years. And the next 10 years will be decisive to meet the Paris Climate Agreement. And I think investors have realized that. So in Europe, to give Shell as an example, despite Shell's very strong communications, we are Paris aligned, you have to vote against this resolution, 30%, more than double from last year, voted for this resolution. And in Equinor it was even 39%. But even more important, in the US, we were able to file our resolutions for the first time. In the Trump years, it was impossible, but now with the Biden administration, we were able to get the same resolution on the ballot in Chevron, Phillips 66 and ConocoPhillips. They responded exactly the same as Shell a couple of years ago, Total, BP a couple of years ago. The emissions of our customers, Scope 3, that's not our responsibility, that's not our problem. We're going to decrease our own emissions, but you can't ask, it's unreasonable to ask us to decrease the Scope 3 emissions, the emissions of our products. And investors in the US, by 3 majorities, 58, 61 and even 80% said, no, that's your responsibility. You have to decrease emissions in the next 10 years. So that's really a game changer, I think. And then, if I may, yesterday a Dutch judge said exactly the same to Shell. Yesterday, this is world news, I hope, and also reads Paris. Yesterday, a Dutch judge said in a court case, Friends of the Earth versus Shell, you have to decrease your emissions this decade by 45%.
Perhaps to Tarek, and I was going to follow on that, indeed, quite a breakthrough from a legal standpoint. You know, it took a legal process to get a company to act on something they should have acted before. But also, we've recently heard also the International Energy Agency put out some research that if we were to meet Paris Agreement, we need to somehow start or stop a lot of the coal production and some of those things. So evidence and science seems to be very important. As an engineer, Tarek, what else is needed for some of these players to actually align further, right? I mean, to make sure that they remain in this journey?
Well, I work for Follow This, and this is why I believe in what Follow This does. What Follow This does is accompanying companies in this journey towards change. And that's at the bottom of every one of our resolutions. We always end up our resolutions with you have our support. We step in as shareholders, as long-term shareholders, willing for the company not to lose value, not to destroy value, nor for them and nor for the rest of the economic system. So what we need is to support them on this long-term journey, to stand by their side and to keep asking the same fair ask. Take into account your scope 3 and have it go downwards. Because that's the elephant in the room. Maybe we didn't even mention that. We always say net zero. And most of the time, net zero is linked to geography or net zero on scope 1 and 2. And it sounds like a net zero, but it's not until scope 3 goes net zero.
Right.
So we have to accompany them on the journey. We have to stay by their side.
The fundamental change requires a lot more engagement. And Mark, you've been quite successful in this shareholder engagement and advocacy. But given that we have COP26 only a few months down the road, and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is such an important final negotiation that is pending and is going to have an impact on carbon. What's the role of Follow This, if at all, in engaging with policymakers and some of the decision makers to some of these agreements that might not always be as close to the private sector? Any thoughts on that?
Our focus, of course, is on the shareholders, because the shareholders are the only ones who can make the executives of the industry change. They're not going to do it on their own accord. They've proven that. So they need the shareholders to compel them and, if needed, to push them. So our focus is really on the shareholders and the oil industry, not on government. I think this fight against climate change is the fight of our lives, and so many people are working on it. Everybody has their own bit. The governments have to stop listening to the lobbies of the oil industry and taking their own decisions, and just follow through with the Paris Climate Agreement, with legislation, finally taxing carbon. I think our role on the COP, there are too many people already there. So I think we should focus on the investors. They are global, and they have an even more important, for them there's even more at stake than the governments at the COP, because they're going to lose their billions if climate change doesn't stop.
So shareholders can vote with their feet if they were to leave. For wrapping up, any final comments on some of the things in the future, some of the topics that you would like to perhaps also undertake, or any thoughts?
If I may take, Mark, in the very close future, we have the AGM at Total's on tomorrow. And it's important to remark that, unfortunately, there is no external climate resolution filed by shareholders this year, because this year they wanted to leave some breathing space to the company to rely on an advisory vote that is submitted by the board, which is resolution number 14, if you want to follow the AGM on tomorrow. Many investors were vocal, saying we should vote against this resolution 14 because the climate plan presented by Total to its shareholders is not enough to save us from a devastating climate change. So that's the close future. We will see tomorrow how efficient the advisory votes can be on impacting the board's strategy. Because we have been seeing in the past how external resolutions are efficient, because they are. All of them have an impact. And we will see how efficient the advisory vote will be on tomorrow. That's for the close future.
Well, congratulations to both of you for really making big change, and not only big change, but making change with big players. I think this gives a lot of hope to the players. So stay with me as I close this session. So thank you for everyone who has been participating with us today. I think we started with two entrepreneurs that raised in order to engage with startups and with incubation, and also with the opportunity to not only invest but also give back. Then we listen to someone like Brooke in Ceres that provides an ecosystem, that provides a toolkit for investors to mobilize institutional investors. And here we're finishing with these two gentlemen that are taking the oil industry by its horns, trying to make shareholders conscious of their power, and their power of voting and their power of voice. And this is indeed a great opportunity to show that change could happen now and that we can all be change makers. Thank you for being part of this session. Thank you for joining us, and keep enjoying the Change Now program. Thank you and good afternoon.